License and registration. Of course, officer. Can you tell me why you pulled me over? I'll ask the questions. Where are you coming from? I'm coming from the VA hospital. I had a medical appointment. What's in the backpack? Medical paperwork, my medications. I'm a veteran. I just finished my appointment. Step out of the vehicle. Officer, I haven't done anything wrong. Can you please tell me what violation I committed? I said step out of the vehicle. Now, I'm complying. I just want to understand what I'm being stopped for. Put your hands on the hood. Do you have any weapons? No weapons. I'm a Marine Corps veteran. I know how to comply with law enforcement. A Marine, doesn't give you special treatment. I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm asking for basic respect and a legal reason for this stop. Officer Daniel Martinez had been with the San Diego Police Department for 6 years when he pulled over a vehicle that would destroy his career, cost the city $12.8 million, and expose a pattern of racial profiling so systematic that it would trigger a Department of Justice investigation into his entire unit. He was 29 years old, experienced enough to understand that traffic stops require reasonable suspicion of a violation, but apparently convinced that driving while black in a predominantly white neighborhood was sufficient justification. One Wednesday afternoon in the Rancho Bernardo area of San Diego, he initiated a traffic stop on a 2018 Honda Accord driven by a black man in his early 30s. The driver was James Thompson, a decorated Marine Corps veteran who had served 2 combat deployments in Afghanistan and now worked as a counselor at the Veterans Affairs Medical Center, helping other veterans transition to civilian life. Thompson had committed no traffic violation. His vehicle registration was current. His license was valid. He had no outstanding warrants. He was simply driving home from work through a neighborhood Martinez patrolled aggressively. What Martinez did next: conducting an illegal stop without reasonable suspicion, searching Thompson's vehicle without consent or probable cause, detaining him for 73 minutes while running repeated warrant checks and calling for drug-sniffing dogs, and subjecting Thompson to treatment that multiple supervisors would later acknowledge had no legal justification would become a federal case, exposing how individual officers can terrorize law-abiding citizens through systematic racial profiling. The jury would award $12.8 million, finding Martinez's actions constituted not just an illegal stop, but a deliberate pattern of targeting black drivers that his department had documented and ignored for years. A black man in his early 30s, James Thompson, was driving his silver Honda Accord southbound on Rancho Bernardo Road, returning home after completing his shift at the VA Medical Center, where he counseled veterans struggling with PTSD and transition issues. His VA employee badge was clipped to his shirt pocket. His Marine Corps veteran license plate was visible on his vehicle. No traffic violation, no erratic driving, no equipment problems, just a veteran driving home from helping other veterans. But Officer Martinez saw him through a filter distorted by racial bias, unable to process a black man in an expensive neighborhood as anything other than suspicious. Before we continue, where are you watching from? If this is your first time here, please hit that subscribe button. Stories like these show what happens when officers profile citizens based on race rather than conduct, and your support helps us expose patterns that departments document but refuse to address. Rancho Bernardo is an affluent planned community in northern San Diego, California. Developed in the 1960s and 1970s, the neighborhood features single-family homes with manicured lawns, tree-lined streets, well-maintained parks, and a country club that serves as a social center for residents. The area's median household income exceeds $110,000. The population is approximately 77% white, 14% Asian, 6% Hispanic, and less than 2% black. The neighborhood prides itself on low crime rates, excellent schools, and a family-friendly atmosphere. Residents frequently cite safety as a primary reason for choosing Rancho Bernardo, though that perception of safety is maintained partly through aggressive policing that disproportionately targets people of color who enter or pass through the area. Rancho Bernardo Road is the main arterial running through the community, connecting to Interstate 15 and providing access to shopping centers, medical facilities, and residential neighborhoods. The speed limit is 45 miles per hour. The road features clear lane markings, traffic signals at major intersections, and generally light to moderate traffic during off-peak hours. It was 3:45 p.m. on a Wednesday in October. The weather was mild, typical for San Diego in fall, with temperatures in the mid-70s and clear skies. Traffic on Rancho Bernardo Road was moderate, with the afternoon school pickup rush beginning but the evening commute not yet started. Visibility was excellent. Road conditions were perfect. The San Diego Police Department's Northern Division patrols Rancho Bernardo and surrounding areas. The division had developed a reputation within SDPD for aggressive traffic enforcement, particularly targeting vehicles that officers believed did not belong in the affluent neighborhoods they protected. Internal communications would later reveal that officers used coded language like "wrong vehicle for the area" or "suspicious presence" to describe traffic stops that were actually based on the race of the driver rather than any observed violation. James Thompson had driven this route 5 days a week for 3 years since accepting his position at the VA Medical Center. He always took Rancho Bernardo Road because it was the most direct path from the VA facility to his home in Myra Mesa, a more diverse middle-class neighborhood 6 miles away. He drove carefully, always mindful of speed limits and traffic signals, conscious that as a black man in an expensive car, he attracted attention from police. On this particular Wednesday afternoon, Thompson had completed his 7:00 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. shift counseling veterans. He had changed out of his professional clothes into a Marine Corps t-shirt and jeans. He had stopped at the VA pharmacy to pick up medications for his own service-related injuries. He was driving home, looking forward to an evening with his wife and 2 young daughters. He had done nothing to attract legitimate police attention. He had violated no law, no traffic regulation, no ordinance. But Officer Daniel Martinez had been watching him since he entered Rancho Bernardo Road and had decided this particular vehicle required a stop. James Thompson had been a Marine Corps infantryman for 8 years before transitioning to civilian life. 8 years of service that included 2 combat deployments to Helmand Province, Afghanistan, where he served as a squad leader, earned a Navy Achievement Medal for valor, and returned home with physical injuries from an IED blast and psychological scars that would take years of therapy to address. Thompson had enlisted in the Marines at 19 years old, immediately after graduating from high school in South Los Angeles. He had watched his neighborhood struggle with gang violence, drug addiction, and poverty. He had lost friends to street violence. He had seen limited opportunities for young black men without college degrees or family connections. The Marines had offered structure, purpose, a path out of circumstances that felt impossible to escape. Boot camp at Marine Corps Recruit Depot, San Diego had been the hardest thing he had ever experienced, designed to break down civilians and rebuild them as Marines. Thompson had not just survived it, he had excelled. He graduated as the honor graduate of his platoon, recognized for leadership, discipline, and commitment to the values the Marines demanded. His first deployment to Afghanistan in 2011 had tested everything the Marines had taught him. He was 21 years old, leading a squad of Marines through some of the most dangerous territory in Helmand Province. He coordinated patrols, made life and death decisions, and brought every member of his squad home alive despite multiple firefights and IED encounters. His second deployment in 2013 had been worse. More combat, more losses of Marines from other units. The IED blast that sent shrapnel into his left leg and caused traumatic brain injury symptoms that would affect him for years. The Combat Action Ribbon. The Navy Achievement Medal with Valor device for pulling 2 wounded Marines to safety under fire. The nightmares that started during that deployment and continued after he returned home. Thompson had separated from the Marines in 2015 after 8 years of service, medically retired due to his injuries. At 27 years old, he faced the challenge of translating military experience into civilian employment. He had leadership skills, discipline, crisis management experience, but no college degree and limited civilian work history. He had used his GI Bill benefits to complete his bachelor's degree in psychology at San Diego State University, focusing his studies on trauma and veteran mental health issues. He had participated in his own therapy through the VA to address PTSD and traumatic brain injury symptoms. He had learned about the epidemic of veteran suicide, about the struggles fellow veterans faced with addiction, homelessness, and civilian transition. After completing his degree, Thompson had accepted a position at the San Diego VA Medical Center as a readjustment counselor in the Vet Center program. His role was to help recently separated veterans navigate civilian life, connect with mental health services, address substance abuse issues, and build support networks that could prevent the isolation and despair that too often led to tragic outcomes. Thompson was exceptional at his work. He understood what his clients were experiencing because he had lived it. He could recognize PTSD symptoms because he managed his own. He could speak to the challenges of finding purpose after military service because he had confronted those challenges. His clients trusted him in ways they often could not trust civilian counselors who had never served. His supervisors described him as one of the most effective counselors on staff. At 33 years old, Thompson had built a life he was proud of. He was married to Lisa, a nurse at Sharp Memorial Hospital whom he had met through a mutual friend 3 years earlier. They had 2 daughters, ages 4 and 2. They owned a modest home in Myra Mesa, a diverse San Diego neighborhood with a strong military community. Thompson coached youth soccer on weekends. He volunteered with veteran service organizations. He was active in his church. That Wednesday, Thompson had arrived at the VA Medical Center at 6:45 a.m. for his shift starting at 7:00 a.m. He had counseled 6 veterans during his shift, addressing issues ranging from job search strategies to crisis intervention for a client experiencing suicidal ideation. He had completed required documentation of his sessions. He had attended a staff meeting about new VA programs for homeless veterans. He had finished his shift at 3:30 p.m. and stopped at the VA pharmacy to pick up medications he took for chronic pain from his combat injuries and for management of anxiety related to PTSD. He had changed in the staff locker room, putting on his favorite Marine Corps t-shirt, the one with his unit insignia and Semper Fi across the back, and comfortable jeans for the drive home. He had left the VA facility at 3:40 p.m., driving his 2018 Honda Accord that he had purchased 2 years earlier after saving aggressively from his VA salary. The car was his first major purchase after separating from the Marines. Silver, clean, well-maintained, with his Marine Corps veteran license plate proudly displayed. He looked like what he was, a veteran driving home after a day helping other veterans. His VA employee badge was still clipped to his shirt pocket, visible through his T-shirt. His bearing, even in casual clothes, reflected years of military discipline. He drove carefully, always aware that police looked at him differently than they looked at white drivers in expensive neighborhoods. Thompson had been pulled over twice before in the 3 years he had driven through Rancho Bernardo to and from work. Both times the officers had eventually let him go without citation, but both times he had been subjected to extensive questioning about where he was going, where he was coming from, and what he was doing in the area. Both times he had felt the implicit message, "You don't belong here." On this Wednesday afternoon, Officer Daniel Martinez would make that message explicit. Daniel Martinez was 29 years old. He had been with the San Diego Police Department for 6 years, assigned to the Northern Division that patrolled Rancho Bernardo and surrounding affluent neighborhoods. He was aggressive, statistics-focused, and convinced that his role was protecting wealthy white residents from people who did not belong in their neighborhoods. In 6 years, Martinez had compiled a record that documented a disturbing pattern of racially motivated traffic stops. 43 complaints, 43. 27 involved allegations of racial profiling, unlawful search, or harassment of Black and Hispanic drivers. 5 had been sustained, resulting in written reprimands and mandatory bias training. The remaining 38 had been closed as not sustained or unfounded despite statistical evidence showing Martinez stopped Black drivers at rates 8 times higher than white drivers while working the same patrol areas and shifts. Martinez had a pattern. He stopped Black and Hispanic drivers in Rancho Bernardo for minor equipment violations or driving behaviors he rarely cited when white drivers engaged in identical conduct. He questioned drivers extensively about their reasons for being in the area. He searched vehicles based on vague claims of suspicious behavior or odors that officers would later testify they could not verify. He detained drivers for extended periods while running warrant checks, calling for backup, and creating intimidating situations designed to make drivers uncomfortable returning to the neighborhood. A Black businessman driving a BMW was stopped by Martinez for allegedly failing to signal a lane change. Martinez questioned him for 40 minutes about his employment, where he lived, and what he was doing in Rancho Bernardo. The driver lived in Rancho Bernardo and was returning from work. Complaint filed, not sustained. A Hispanic family in a minivan was stopped by Martinez for a supposed broken taillight that inspection would prove was functioning properly. Martinez questioned the parents' immigration status despite all being U.S. citizens. Complaint filed, sustained, training assigned. An Asian college student was stopped by Martinez for alleged speeding, though the officer's dash camera showed the student driving at or below the speed limit. Martinez searched the vehicle claiming he smelled marijuana. No marijuana was found. Complaint filed, not sustained. The pattern was extensively documented. SDPD's Internal Affairs Division had investigated numerous complaints. Statistical analysis of Martinez's stops showed clear racial disparities that could not be explained by crime rates, traffic violation rates, or any factor other than racial bias. Civil rights organizations had sent letters to SDPD citing Martinez as an example of racial profiling requiring intervention. But Martinez remained on patrol in Rancho Bernardo, responding to the same neighborhoods, making the same types of stops, accumulating complaints that apparently never created sufficient consequences to change his behavior. Internal communications later obtained through discovery revealed that Martinez's supervisors were aware of his pattern, but valued his high activity numbers. Martinez made numerous traffic stops, wrote many citations, and generated statistics that made his unit look productive. Supervisors noted concerns about his stop patterns and evaluations, but took no meaningful action to restrict his authority or remove him from patrol. The Northern Division had developed a culture that implicitly encouraged aggressive enforcement against suspicious individuals in affluent areas. Officers used coded language to communicate about drivers who did not fit neighborhood demographics. Supervisors praised officers who made high numbers of stops even when those stops showed clear racial disparities. The division's leadership prioritized resident satisfaction from wealthy white homeowners over constitutional rights of people of color passing through the area. Martinez had internalized that culture completely. He viewed his role as protecting Rancho Bernardo from outsiders. He measured his success by how many people he stopped, questioned, and searched rather than by legitimate law enforcement metrics like crime reduction or traffic safety. He had learned that his department would protect him as long as he maintained high activity numbers regardless of how many complaints he accumulated or how clear the racial pattern became. On that Wednesday afternoon, Martinez was on routine patrol in Rancho Bernardo when he observed Thompson's Honda Accord traveling southbound on Rancho Bernardo Road. Martinez immediately focused on the vehicle. In his mind, the factors added up to suspicious. Newer Honda, driven by a black man traveling through an affluent white neighborhood in mid-afternoon. Martinez followed Thompson for approximately 8 blocks, looking for any violation that could justify a stop. Thompson maintained the speed limit. He signaled all turns. He stopped completely at stop signs. He maintained proper lane position. Martinez could identify no legitimate traffic violation. But Martinez activated his lights and sirens anyway at 3:48 p.m., initiating a traffic stop that would last 73 minutes, involve 4 additional police units, include an illegal search of Thompson's vehicle, and ultimately cost SDPD $12.8 million when a federal jury found the stop was motivated entirely by racial profiling and violated Thompson's constitutional rights. Martinez approached Thompson's vehicle convinced he would find evidence of criminal activity. He had no legal basis for the stop. He had no reasonable suspicion. He had only racial bias and an assumption that black men in Rancho Bernardo required investigation. Do you think officers should face automatic termination after documented patterns of racially disparate traffic stops? Drop your answer below. James Thompson saw the flashing lights behind him and felt his pulse immediately quicken. He had done nothing wrong. He knew he had done nothing wrong, but he also knew that knowledge offered no protection when an officer had already decided to stop you. He activated his turn signal, checked his mirrors, and pulled into a shopping center parking lot to get off the main road. He put the vehicle in park, turned off the engine, and placed both hands on the steering wheel at 10 and 2 o'clock. Years of military training combined with awareness of how traffic stops could escalate had taught him to make every movement visible and non-threatening. Officer Martinez approached the driver's side window, his hand resting on his service weapon. Thompson lowered the window completely, license and registration. Thompson kept his voice calm and respectful. Of course, officer. Can you tell me why you pulled me over? I'll ask the questions. License and registration. Thompson moved slowly and deliberately. I'm going to reach into my glove compartment for my registration and then into my wallet for my license. Is that okay? Martinez did not respond but watched Thompson closely as he retrieved the documents and handed them over. Where are you coming from? Thompson gestured to his VA employee badge still clipped to his shirt pocket. I'm coming from the VA hospital. I had a medical appointment. Actually, I work there. I'm a veterans counselor. Martinez glanced at the badge but showed no reaction. What's in the backpack? The backpack on Thompson's passenger seat contained his work laptop, some client files he had been reviewing, and the pharmacy bag with his medications. Medical paperwork, my prescription medications. I'm a veteran. I just finished my shift at the VA. Martinez's expression hardened. Step out of the vehicle. Thompson felt his stomach drop. Officer, I haven't done anything wrong. Can you please tell me what traffic violation I committed that justified this stop? I said step out of the vehicle. Now. Thompson opened the door slowly and stepped out, keeping his hands visible. I'm complying, officer. I just want to understand what I'm being stopped for. This is important. Under the law, you need reasonable suspicion of a traffic violation to conduct a stop. Martinez moved Thompson toward the rear of the vehicle. Put your hands on the hood. Thompson complied, spreading his feet and placing his palms flat on the warm metal. I'm a Marine Corps veteran. I know how to comply with law enforcement, but I also know my rights. What traffic violation did I commit? Martinez began patting Thompson down. A Marine, doesn't give you special treatment. I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm asking for basic respect and a legal reason for this stop. Martinez found Thompson's wallet, which contained his military ID, his VA employee badge, and his driver's license. He also found Thompson's cell phone in his pocket. This is where traffic stops become fishing expeditions. Officer Daniel Martinez had no legitimate reason for stopping James Thompson. Thompson had committed no traffic violation. But Martinez had developed a pattern of making pretextual stops of black drivers and then using prolonged detention, invasive questioning, and threats of search or arrest to turn routine traffic stops into extended investigations searching for any possible criminal activity. Martinez returned to his patrol car to run Thompson's information. Thompson stood beside his vehicle, hands visible, watching other cars pass by. Some drivers slowed to look. One driver, a white woman in a Range Rover, rolled down her window and asked if everything was okay. Thompson assured her he was fine, though he felt anything but fine. Martinez returned after 15 minutes. Your license is valid. No warrants. Registration current. Thompson waited for what should come next, an explanation of the violation and either a citation or a warning. Instead, Martinez continued questioning. What kind of work do you do at the VA? I'm a readjustment counselor. I help veterans transition to civilian life, manage PTSD, connect with services. You live around here? No, I live in Myra Mesa. I drive through Rancho Bernardo every day to and from work. Martinez looked at the Honda. Nice car for a VA counselor. Thompson felt anger rising but kept his voice level. I bought it with my salary. Veterans counselors are federal employees with reasonable pay. Is there a law against driving a Honda Accord in Rancho Bernardo? Don't get smart with me. I'm going to search your vehicle. On what basis? You need probable cause or my consent. You have neither. I smell marijuana. Thompson's voice rose despite his efforts to stay calm. That's a lie. I don't use marijuana. I'm subject to federal drug testing as a VA employee. You're inventing probable cause to search my vehicle without justification. You refusing consent? I'm asserting my Fourth Amendment rights. You do not have probable cause and I do not consent to a search. Martinez called for backup. Additional units arrived within 10 minutes. 3 more patrol cars, 4 more officers. Traffic in the shopping center parking lot slowed as drivers observed what looked like a high-risk felony stop. Officer Sarah Rodriguez, one of the responding officers, approached Thompson. Sir, has this vehicle been searched? Thompson welcomed another officer's presence, hoping for someone who might recognize the illegality of what was happening. No. Officer Martinez claimed he smelled marijuana to justify a search. That claim is false. I've explicitly refused consent. I'm a veteran. I'm a VA employee. I'm driving home from work. I've committed no traffic violation and no crime. Rodriguez looked at Martinez. You witnessed a traffic violation. Martinez was defensive. He was driving suspiciously. That's not a violation. Did he speed? Fail to signal, run a stop sign? He fits the profile for someone who might be engaged in criminal activity. Rodriguez's expression showed concern. That's not probable cause for a stop or a search. But Martinez had already decided how this would end. He called for a K-9 unit to conduct an exterior sniff of the vehicle. Thompson knew this was another violation. The Supreme Court had ruled in Rodriguez v. United States that police could not extend traffic stops to wait for drug dogs without reasonable suspicion of criminal activity beyond the initial traffic violation. Officer, this is an unlawful extension of the stop. You have no reasonable suspicion justifying calling a drug dog. I'm being detained without legal justification. The K-9 unit arrived 35 minutes after the initial stop. The dog walked around Thompson's vehicle. The handler claimed the dog alerted to the trunk. Thompson's voice carried to the growing crowd of onlookers. That dog did not alert. I watched the handler signal the dog. This is a false alert to manufacture probable cause. Despite Thompson's objections, Martinez searched the vehicle. He opened every compartment, removed the seats, emptied the trunk, and spread Thompson's belongings across the parking lot. He found Thompson's work laptop, client files that were confidential VA records, prescription medications in properly labeled bottles, a Marine Corps duffel bag containing workout clothes, and a family photo of Thompson with his wife and daughters. He found no drugs, no weapons, no contraband, no evidence of any criminal activity whatsoever. The search lasted another 30 minutes. By the time Martinez finished, Thompson had been detained for 73 minutes. His vehicle was in disarray. His confidential work files were compromised. His medications were scattered across his car, and he had been subjected to treatment that violated every constitutional protection against unreasonable search and seizure. Martinez returned Thompson's documents. "You're free to go." Thompson's hands were shaking from anger and adrenaline. "What traffic violation justified this stop? You never told me." Martinez walked away without answering. Should police departments face federal oversight after officers accumulate patterns of racially disparate stops? Let me know what you think. Thompson sat in his car for 10 minutes before driving, trying to calm down enough to drive safely. He called his wife and told her what happened. She urged him to file a complaint immediately and contact an attorney. Thompson knew she was right. But he also knew from his work with veterans that complaints against police rarely resulted in meaningful accountability. What Thompson did not know was that a white woman who had watched the entire encounter had recorded 45 minutes of video on her phone and would contact the ACLU that evening to report what she had witnessed. The video that Catherine Miller recorded and provided to the ACLU of San Diego showed Officer Martinez conducting a stop that violated every constitutional protection against racial profiling and unlawful search. Miller had pulled into the same shopping center parking lot to run errands and had immediately noticed the traffic stop seemed unusual. When additional patrol cars arrived and Martinez began the extended detention, she had started recording. Her video showed Thompson standing calmly beside his vehicle with hands visible while Martinez questioned him extensively. The audio captured Thompson repeatedly asking what violation justified the stop and Martinez refusing to answer. It showed Thompson explicitly refusing consent to search and citing his Fourth Amendment rights. It captured Martinez claiming he smelled marijuana and Thompson stating that claim was false. It documented the 35-minute wait for the K-9 unit and what appeared to be the handler signaling the dog rather than the dog alerting naturally. Miller had been a prosecutor for 15 years before retiring. She understood constitutional criminal procedure. She recognized immediately that what she was witnessing was an illegal stop, an unconstitutional search, and racial profiling. She had contacted the ACLU within hours and provided her video along with a detailed statement of what she observed. The ACLU contacted Thompson the following day. Thompson had already filed a complaint with SDPD's Internal Affairs Division, but he had little faith the complaint would result in accountability given his previous experiences. The ACLU attorneys reviewed the video, obtained Thompson's military records and employment documentation, and determined he had a strong federal civil rights case. But the ACLU also recognized this case represented something bigger than one illegal stop. They requested Martinez's complete traffic stop data under California public records laws. The data revealed a pattern so clear and so extensive that it constituted statistical proof of racial profiling. The ACLU shared this analysis with the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. DOJ opened a preliminary investigation into Martinez's traffic stops and SDPD Northern Division's practices. They expanded the investigation to include all Northern Division officers and found similar patterns across the unit, though Martinez's disparities were the most extreme. SDPD placed Martinez on administrative duty pending completion of the DOJ investigation and internal affairs review. The department's Internal Affairs Division sustained findings that Martinez had conducted an unlawful stop without reasonable suspicion and an illegal search without probable cause. Martinez was suspended for 30 days without pay and removed from patrol duties. But the sustained findings came 6 months after the incident, after federal investigators had already exposed the pattern, after national media had covered the case, after Thompson's attorneys had filed a federal lawsuit that would proceed to trial. The DOJ concluded its investigation 14 months after Thompson's stop. The findings were damning. Systematic racial profiling by multiple Northern Division officers, supervisory failure to address obvious disparities in stop data, and department culture that prioritized aggressive enforcement in wealthy neighborhoods over constitutional policing. SDPD entered into a consent decree requiring comprehensive reforms, independent monitoring, and federal oversight of traffic stop practices. But for James Thompson, the damage was done. The 73-minute stop had re-traumatized him, triggering PTSD symptoms he had worked years to manage. The search of his vehicle had compromised confidential client files. The public humiliation of being treated like a criminal in front of dozens of witnesses had affected his sense of safety and dignity. And the knowledge that this had happened not because he did anything wrong, but because an officer saw his race and decided he did not belong would stay with him for years. Should officers who conduct stops without reasonable suspicion face criminal prosecution for civil rights violations? Drop your answer. The federal civil rights lawsuit was filed 8 months after Thompson's stop in the United States District Court for the Southern District of California. The complaint named Officer Daniel Martinez individually, SDPD Northern Division Sergeant Robert Chen for supervisory failure, SDPD Captain Patricia Ruiz for command failure despite knowledge of Martinez's pattern, and the city of San Diego. The complaint included Martinez's complete disciplinary record: 43 complaints over 6 years, 27 alleging racial profiling, 5 sustained. It included statistical analysis of his 847 traffic stops, showing clear racial disparities. It included the DOJ investigation findings, documenting systematic civil rights violations by Northern Division officers. The city's attorneys recognized the case was legally indefensible, but attempted to settle for amounts Thompson's attorneys considered inadequate given the severity of the violations and the documented pattern the department had ignored for years. Thompson's attorneys insisted the case proceed to trial to establish clear precedent and accountability. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Thompson's attorneys presented devastating evidence: Catherine Miller's 45-minute video showing the entire stop, search, and Thompson's repeated assertions of his rights; dashboard camera footage from Martinez's patrol car confirming Thompson committed no traffic violation before the stop; statistical analysis by an expert criminologist showing Martinez's stop patterns could not be explained by any factor other than racial bias; testimony from 11 other Black and Hispanic drivers who had been stopped by Martinez in similar circumstances; internal SDPD communications showing supervisors were aware of Martinez's pattern but took only minimal corrective action; DOJ investigation findings documenting systematic civil rights violations. Thompson testified about his military service, his work helping veterans, and the psychological impact of being treated like a criminal for driving while Black. He described how the stop had triggered PTSD symptoms he had managed for years. He explained how the public humiliation had affected his sense of safety and dignity. The city's defense attempted to argue Martinez had reasonable suspicion based on Thompson's driving behavior and that the search was justified by the K-9 alert. But video evidence destroyed both claims by showing Thompson drove properly and the K-9 handler appeared to signal the dog. The jury deliberated for 9 hours over 2 days. The verdict was unanimous on all claims. They found Martinez had violated Thompson's constitutional rights through racial profiling, unlawful stop, and illegal search. They found supervisors had failed to address Martinez's documented pattern despite clear evidence. They found San Diego maintained policies and customs that encouraged racial profiling in affluent neighborhoods. The damages were substantial: $3.8 million in compensatory damages to Thompson for violation of constitutional rights, emotional distress, and exacerbation of PTSD symptoms; $9 million in punitive damages divided among defendants; $4.5 million against Martinez for egregious violations with documented pattern; $2.8 million against the city of San Diego for deliberate indifference to Martinez's pattern; $1 million against Sergeant Chen, and $700,000 against Captain Ruiz. Total verdict: $12.8 million. It was the second largest verdict in California history for racial profiling in a traffic stop. Officer Daniel Martinez was terminated 2 weeks after the verdict. The termination letter detailed his 6-year pattern. Officer Martinez conducted traffic stops based on race rather than observed violations, engaged in pretextual searches without legal justification, and systematically violated constitutional rights of Black and Hispanic drivers. His pattern was documented through 43 complaints, statistical analysis of 847 stops, and sustained findings in multiple investigations. His employment is terminated with cause effective immediately. Martinez's name was entered into the National Decertification Index, ending his law enforcement career at 29 years old. Sergeant Robert Chen was demoted to officer and transferred from Northern Division. Captain Patricia Ruiz was reassigned to administrative duties and passed over for promotion to deputy chief. Both remained employed, but their careers effectively ended. San Diego implemented comprehensive reforms under the DOJ consent decree. The DOJ required San Diego to maintain these reforms until statistical analysis showed 3 consecutive years without racial disparities in traffic stops. James Thompson used part of his settlement to establish a scholarship fund for children of veterans. He continued his work at the VA helping veterans transition to civilian life. But he never drove through Rancho Bernardo again, taking a longer route to and from work that avoided the neighborhood where he had been terrorized for 73 minutes because of his race. James Thompson testified before the California State Senate Public Safety Committee during hearings on the Racial and Identity Profiling Act. His testimony was broadcast statewide and covered extensively in national media. My name is James Thompson. I'm a Marine Corps veteran. I served 2 combat deployments to Afghanistan. I earned a Navy Achievement Medal for valor for pulling wounded Marines to safety under fire. I came home with physical injuries from an IED blast and PTSD that I've managed through years of therapy. He paused, his military bearing evident even sitting at the witness table. I now work at the San Diego VA Medical Center as a readjustment counselor. I help veterans who are struggling with PTSD, substance abuse, and civilian transition. I help veterans who are suicidal. I help veterans who are homeless. I do this work because I understand what they're experiencing. I've lived it. Another pause, his voice tightening. On October 18th, I was driving home from work through Rancho Bernardo. I was wearing my Marine Corps t-shirt. My veteran license plate was visible. My VA employee badge was clipped to my pocket. I had committed no traffic violation. I was simply driving the same route I take 5 days a week. He looked directly at the committee members. Officer Daniel Martinez pulled me over. When I asked what violation I committed, he refused to answer. He questioned me about where I was coming from, where I was going, what I was doing in the area. He demanded to search my vehicle. When I asserted my Fourth Amendment rights and refused consent, he claimed he smelled marijuana, a lie to manufacture probable cause. He called for backup. 4 more patrol cars arrived, treating me like a dangerous criminal. He detained me for 73 minutes while searching my vehicle and finding nothing because there was nothing to find. His voice strengthened with controlled anger. 43 complaints. Officer Martinez had 43 complaints over 6 years, 27 alleged racial profiling. 5 were sustained. San Diego Police Department knew he was targeting Black and Hispanic drivers. They knew his stops showed racial disparities that couldn't be explained by any legitimate law enforcement factor. Statistical analysis of his 847 stops proved he was profiling. But they left him on patrol because his activity numbers looked good. He leaned forward. I served my country. I saved Marines' lives under fire. I came home and dedicated my life to helping other veterans, and I was treated like a criminal for driving while Black in an affluent neighborhood. The jury awarded $12.8 million because they recognized this wasn't just about one illegal stop. It was about a pattern San Diego documented and ignored for 6 years. This settlement came from taxpayers. That's money that won't fund schools or veteran services. It's the price San Diego paid for allowing an officer to terrorize people of color for 6 years, despite 43 complaints documenting his pattern. The hearing room was silent. If this can happen to a decorated combat veteran wearing his Marine Corps shirt and driving home from helping other veterans, what happens to young Black men who don't have military service or federal employment? What happens when police see race as reasonable suspicion and departments document patterns, but refuse to act until federal juries impose multi-million-dollar verdicts? Should officers face federal prosecution when stop data proves patterns of racial profiling? Let me know what you think. This was not about one Wednesday afternoon in October. This was about a 6-year pattern of racial profiling that San Diego Police Department documented in 43 complaints, confirmed through statistical analysis of 847 traffic stops, and ignored until a federal jury imposed $12.8 million in damages. Officer Daniel Martinez's record told a story that supervisors acknowledged in internal communications, but never addressed with meaningful discipline. 43 complaints. 27 alleging racial profiling. 5 sustained. Statistical evidence showing he stopped black drivers at rates 8 times higher than their population representation and searched them at rates 4 times higher than white drivers. The pattern was mathematically undeniable and extensively documented in the department's own files. But Martinez remained on patrol in Rancho Bernardo for 6 years, making pretextual stops, conducting illegal searches, and terrorizing people of color who entered or passed through affluent neighborhoods, because his supervisors valued his activity statistics more than constitutional rights. The case exposed broader failures. San Diego Police Department's Northern Division maintained a culture that implicitly encouraged aggressive enforcement targeting people who did not fit neighborhood demographics. Officers used coded language about suspicious drivers. Supervisors praised high stop numbers without analyzing whether those stops showed racial disparities. The division treated wealthy residents' preferences for seeing fewer people of color in their neighborhoods as legitimate law enforcement priorities. Daniel Martinez's career is over. That's consequence. Sergeant Chen was demoted. Captain Ruiz was reassigned. That's supervisory accountability. San Diego paid $12.8 million. That's financial consequence. But verdicts and terminations do not undo psychological trauma. They do not restore the sense of safety that comes from believing police exist to protect rather than harass. They do not compensate for the thousands of black and Hispanic drivers who were stopped, questioned, and searched by Martinez and other Northern Division officers over years of documented profiling. The real question is what changes now. Does San Diego finally remove officers after the 20th racial profiling complaint instead of the 43rd? Do supervisors finally face real consequences when they ignore statistical evidence of discrimination? Does the department finally acknowledge that protecting wealthy white residents' comfort is not a legitimate law enforcement objective that justifies violating constitutional rights? Because if we do not dismantle the system that allowed Martinez to profile drivers for 6 years, despite 43 complaints and clear statistical evidence, if we do not address the culture that treats people of color in affluent neighborhoods as inherently suspicious, then we are simply waiting for the next pretextual stop, the next illegal search. The next decorated veteran who learns that military service offers no protection against being treated like a criminal because of skin color. San Diego's reforms under the DOJ consent decree represent progress. Body cameras, supervisor review, public data reporting, community oversight, and federal monitoring. But these reforms exist because James Thompson had the knowledge to assert his rights, the resources to hire civil rights attorneys, and the courage to pursue a case through trial. They would not exist if Martinez had stopped someone without those advantages. These reforms are the $12.8 million wake-up call. They are reactive, not proactive. They emerged from litigation, not from internal commitment to constitutional policing. Comment if you believe this should be federal law. Officers whose traffic stops show statistically significant racial disparities face automatic termination and permanent disqualification from law enforcement. And if you think these stories expose how departments document racial profiling patterns for years and act only when federal courts impose massive verdicts, hit that subscribe button. We are not stopping. We are going to keep documenting cases where statistics prove discrimination and departments ignore evidence until litigation forces accountability. We are going to keep demanding that 43 complaints trigger removal long before decorated veterans are terrorized for driving while black. We are going to keep fighting for the James Thompsons and every person of color who navigates daily life knowing that looking suspicious means existing in spaces where your race is a minority. This is not about one officer or one veteran. This is about all of us, and whether we tolerate police departments that maintain cultures of racial profiling despite constitutional prohibitions, statistical evidence, and decades of civil rights litigation establishing that race cannot be reasonable suspicion. It is about whether military service, federal employment, and perfect driving records protect people of color from being treated as criminals. It is about whether departments that document patterns through complaint files and stop data act on that evidence or wait until federal juries impose consequences that taxpayers fund. Daniel Martinez is gone, But the culture that protected him through 43 complaints and 847 stops showing clear racial disparities still exists in departments nationwide that view aggressive enforcement in affluent areas as protecting residents rather than profiling citizens. Until we dismantle that culture, we are just counting down to the next traffic stop, the next illegal search, the next person who learns that constitutional protections exist on paper but disappear when officers decide your race makes you suspicious.